All right, so this is Dennis Harabin with Project Scholarship. We're actually here with session two with Tim Rees. So if there's some things that from intro and from who Tim is and some of those aspects, if you go back to our first session, we don't want to waste too much of Tim's time repeating everything they did. We'll highlight a couple of the items here. But first and foremost, Tim, thanks. This is a Saturday morning, just so people know that we're recording this a little early, so we're available for May 1st. You're in a hotel room in Nashville, and could you kind
Yes.
of explain a little bit about the conference that you're at and what you're doing, and how, again, I can't stress enough how you enrollment guys are like live on a suitcase. You're always around. People think you sit in this little golden office and make decisions on people's lives, but you're out there working. So kind of tell us a little bit about where you are, and you're taking the time here, which we appreciate.
Well, thanks again, Dennis. I appreciate the warm welcome and also the invitation to speak. I love speaking to people about the idea of going to college and making the right decision because I know how impactful it was in my own life. So again, as you alluded to, we are in Nashville today and we're working through a homeschool conference. So 7,000 family members here. They're looking at different things, trying to enrich their experience with their children, finding curriculum or some sessions that'll help them with planning or working through what they're doing. And then they're also looking at colleges. And so this is a great venue for us, being a small private liberal arts Christian school. This is something that is a good venue for us to try and find students. And so that's a lot of what we do throughout the years. You've already alluded to as, we don't sit in this ivory tower. We actually get out on the road and actually try and meet people because, again, making that personal connection, helping people get their questions answered instead of through a chat bot that gives you this canned response to every question you ask. It's best to be able to ask a person your direct question that fits specifically to your exact circumstance and then get an actual real answer. And so we try and do that as much as possible, getting out on the road, going to schools, and in this case, going to conferences where students are at, because again, homeschool typically is not a large gathering of people at any one time because they're all usually in their homes, of course, as the name kind of indicates. But at events like this, where they are gathered in larger numbers, we have opportunity to meet more people and talk with them about, again, their challenges, what are their concerns. And again, whether you're homeschooling, private school, public school, concerns are generally the same. What's a good fit for my child? Where's your school? And then how am I going to pay for this? And so those themes continue to recur. But again, even though they're generally the same, they are still all different because, again, your situation is different from the next person beside you, maybe watching this from a different state. And so those are the kind of things we try and address to help people understand that, you can get help. It's a matter of just asking the questions until you get the answer that you need. And so continue to explore those options, talk with people, and find out what's the best fit for you and your child.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And then as far as this particular session, the focus of this session is the differences between the large schools and the small schools. And we'll kind of tie in the private schools versus public schools as well. But from first perspective, reason, again, I've connected with over 2,500 different VPs of enrollment, but I think your background is pretty diverse in the extremes that you've gone through. So I think you have a better perspective than most as to what a very large school, very small school, the difference between public and private, and that aspect. So that's what we wanted to highlight here. So before, in case people haven't heard the earlier session, kind of, can you walk us through? You were originally with, you started higher ed. You actually went through the military. So kind of a real summary, brief background of how you got into higher ed, which is a unique path in itself. You worked at one of the largest private institutions, if you add their online. I mean, they're huge. And then to a really one that's, again, this conference defines a fit for people who really want that personalized piece. So if you can kind of walk through your background, your experience, why you're the person that we chose to talk to about this, and then we'll get into some of those differences and how that can help our audience.
Yeah, great. And Dennis, it's a good segue because I've experienced all of what you've spoken about, either as a student or from where I sit now in my chair from the admissions side of things. So as a college student, I went to community college first. So I experienced, again, a public school, small community college environment for my first few years of college. Then I also experienced a public university. I wouldn't say a super large one, but a larger public university for a bit of my bachelor's studies. And so understanding that admission process and how that worked for them, And then, as you alluded to from my work experience, being at a very large private Christian school where we had a very large residential campus, I would say probably one of the largest residential campuses for private Christian schools. And then also, when, as you alluded to, adding their huge online presence, was the largest school in the country for quite a while, as far as both, for nonprofits. So whether private or public, it was the largest for some period of time. So again, so in that environment, the idea of personalized discussions, we had a few, but most of the time there were more en masse, larger events. On campus overnight visits alone, as an example, we would mostly have about 2,000 students every time we did one of those. Much more difficult to have in one-on-one type interaction in that kind of setting. So that's part of what drew me to the institution I'm at now. It's a very small liberal arts college in South Carolina. I love the weather. I love the campus. It's very beautiful. But again, that setting is much more small, and it's very intentionally so. We, again, thrive on the idea of very low student-to-faculty ratio and grad school placement. Almost all of our programs are bachelor's degrees only. But again, we're trying to set students up for success in their next steps. So we have a very strong pre-med program. Students, study biology at our school, and then they go on to do things at the grad school of their choice. And that runs the gamut of public, private universities where students end up going from our school. So again, finding the right fit for your student is extremely important. That may be a very large environment. They might thrive in that. They might actually need that. If they need the social interaction, they need lots of folks around them, lots of activity going on. Sometimes that can be provided best at a larger place. But I would submit that in most cases, students can thrive in a smaller environment. It's a little more enriching for them, especially if they need a little bit more of this safety net of having a smaller group of friends, especially if they're further away from home, because they no longer have you right there with them, mom and dad. It's more, they're a couple states away. Are they going to be safe? Are they going to be well off mentally and so forth in the classrooms and in the social settings? Are they going to fit in? Are they going to have a comforting environment, the way I would describe it, almost like home? And so if they feel secure in themselves and in their persons and in their environment, that helps them thrive in the classroom, because then they can direct their energy towards study and towards doing well in the classroom, versus perhaps an environment where they may feel more social pressure. There may be more things weighing on their mind that keep them from the ultimate idea, which is to finish the school, graduate on time, and move on to what else they have in life. And so we encourage that highly at the school I'm at now. Erskine College is, again, a very small environment, but it's, again, purposefully so. So finding a school that's a fit for you, that fits what you and your family is trying to accomplish as far as an end goal, is extremely important. As we talked about in the earlier session, there are thousands of colleges all over the country, lots of pretty buildings, lots of pretty lawns. It's a matter of what's happening in those buildings and in the classroom settings and in the residence hall environment, and making sure that that's a fit for your child. If it is, then continue to keep that school on your list. If it isn't, go ahead and cross them off. There are thousands of schools. You can find another one. But then looking through that process and just working through what, again, is going to be the best fit for your student.
Well, the accountant in me, I started my career as an accountant. Everything, when you can't get the accountant out of an accountant, and so the numbers always come into play with me, and the math and all of it. And one of the things I find too is, people look at those. So Project Scholarship in itself is really trying to help make it so that people can go to whatever school they want. I mean, micro scholarships bank it up. We know that there's not enough money coming out of people's pockets to go in. Doesn't matter where you're coming from. Anyone can get this scholarship based on merit alone, based on their ability to do that task that's there. And we're going to train them before that task. And these tasks are routine in process. I mean, it might take a student, literally, social media piece might take them 5 minutes, and they're 10 times better than anyone of our age doing it. And so it might take them only 5 minutes, is doing what they do, doing it right, and banking it up. But as important, I think there's a misnomer that the initial sticker price is what they're actually going to end up paying. And here we're really stressing the fit, large, small, public, private piece, in that it's how long you're there matters more than So getting out early, graduating, I mean, those kind of things are possible, but if sometimes are not possible depending on the type of the school, when they make classes available. And I think the closer and tighter, the smaller the school, the more flexible they are to make things happen for you. So it might look more expensive in the beginning, but in the end, it's really what. And did you get that piece of paper? Wide project. One of the things that drove me insane is finding out how many kids don't get that piece of paper and still have all the student debt. And that's something that, as the nonprofit and engine, that's just unacceptable. So now let's figure out. And again, it's not the school's fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just unacceptable as a society that we have that. So again, driving home some of the math of how, although it may look more, getting out sooner, it kind of levels all out.
Right, exactly. And as you alluded to, there are plenty of articles online, news pieces you can find about student debt and how impactful that is in someone's life. I was actually watching something earlier this week on that very subject where a student had finished their bachelor's degree. I believe it was at a public school, but in a location that was in close proximity to their home. And then they moved basically across country to pursue graduate studies. Ended up being in a program. They were in their very first semester and dropped out, and then all of a sudden had this huge debt and student loans now coming due, and they were in a high cost of living area. And so now all of a sudden this stress and pressure from something that they never even finished was now weighing heavily on them, and they were stressed out as to what to do about it. So as you talked about, even completing, it's a matter of completing on time. So the way the government statistics work is they will usually publish what's called a graduation rate, and it's usually the 6-year graduation rate. So students completing in 4 years is less than the majority complete in that amount of time. Most will either take longer or will drop out along the way. Unfortunate, but true. So when you're looking at graduation rates on any of the ranking sites and those kind of things, the number they publish is those who have completed it within 6 years. So if you're trying to calculate cost and you're figuring, okay, well, I'm going to pay this for 4 years and we'll be done. And then you start comparing, okay, public versus private, which is the best fit for your student should win out. And here's why I say that. You might be able to get a less expensive degree, if you will, by going in-state to a large public school. However, if your student gets off track somewhere along the way there, and it takes a semester or two to figure that out and then come alongside them and help them get back on track, now you're talking 5 or 6 years at even a lower cost will still cost you longer in the long run. Even if you saved $3,000 a year over the higher priced private school, if they finished in those 4 years, over 6 years, you're going to spend $18,000. You talked about accounting, right? Over that 4 years, you would have only spent $12,000 more. So you're in the hole $6,000 by the time they get done, even if they complete it, either institution. But if they complete it the one in 4 versus the one in 6, they're done on time, so they can pursue either master's studies or get right into the workforce, or if you do the 6-year route, well, now they're 25, still on your insurance, still living at home, that kind of thing. And so, again, it can seem less expensive, but in the long run, could be more expensive for you. I would liken it to, not to equate the two, but a purchase of an automobile. You can find some cheap model automobiles that you can get into for a very low price, but will they last? Will you get 100,000 miles out of that vehicle? That kind of thing. So, just weighing all the benefits and the options. So understanding all of that in the equation, not just the hard dollars and cents piece. Again, that's why it's a little bit of a not a mystery, but a softer skill in finding what is the best fit for you and your student. So, again, I can't stress enough, the environment is extremely important to the student. They have to feel safe and nurtured like they already do in your home. And so if you can find that environment in a college setting, pursue that, because that's going to be where they're going to feel the most safe and be able to concentrate on their studies. And again, the more ability to complete on time versus in a situation where they may be socially distracted or distracted by other things going on the campus, or even safety issues, heaven forbid, but that could be the case. And so you want them to be in a safe environment where they can complete on time.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about, all right, I get to the school, my child gets to the school and they realize, nah. And you alluded to the story early on. When they were there one night and realized it wasn't there. Yeah. Most people, unfortunately, can't realize it that soon. I mean, the big picture was good that they realized in one night. But as far as going through, I get there, I decide, hey, I want to transfer. Or a second scenario, I didn't get into the ideal school I wanted to, but is it easier to get into schools after when you've already proven that you can work, like you did the community college route? Kind of
Right.
walk us through what as a parent, if I have to go with the transfer plan, what's a good transfer plan?
Okay, let me back up and address something different too. The scenario we talked about before wasn't essentially a transfer because they hadn't actually begun classes at that
Right.
school. But some options there. Let's say that's the scenario for you. You get into night number 2 and it's a nightmare and you want to leave, or your child wants to leave. Even at that point, there are some other options for you. Now, you may not be able to get into a different school that late in the semester. However, there are always options for, say, a January start. Most schools have a lot more room at January, especially that late in the year, than you would have. If you were approaching a school in August, they're going to be very tight on bed space and classroom space. But by January, there will be students who started that fall who unfortunately won't move on to January. That frees up some space. So that's a little known thing. People don't tend to think about starting in the middle of the year because it's a little odd, but there are some spaces, usually in both bed space and classroom space, to get into a situation there. So if they set out that semester and needed to wait till January, that's an option for you.
So that's very interesting, and that's something I hadn't thought. So if you look at the gap year, when people talk about that gap year, if you really make it a gap semester, again, it's always supply and demand. So a school that might be a little more challenging for you to get into, if you tell them, no, I want a January start as opposed to an August start, there might be an easier way. Am I hearing that it might be easier for them to fit you in and get you into that for acceptance and right out of the bat?
Right. I would say in my experience, now I wouldn't start with that as my initial strategy. I would start with a fall start because that's the traditional.
Sure, obviously.
As a backup plan to if that falls through. So let's say the dream school scenario didn't work for April and May and you couldn't find a good backup through the summer. Perhaps going back to dream school A and saying, hey, I know we can't get in for the fall. Is there a possibility of coming in January for the spring semester? And if so, what else do I need to do to improve my profile enough to then become acceptable for you?
I always equate it to the Rudy story when Rudy wanted to get into Notre Dame. Same reason.
Yep, same kind of thing. So we would just be persistent and follow that up. But again, there are much more room in there because again, the biggest problem with freshman year is a lot of people tend to leave. They don't tend to finish. Either they don't finish the first, they might finish up first semester, but then not come back for second semester, or by the time they get to the end of spring semester, they don't come back for their second year. That's the biggest problem in higher ed right now is people get that far in and now all of a sudden they have debt from something they haven't completed. We kind of alluded to that in a kind of a master's scenario, but even in the bachelor's level, that is the worst drop-off. Higher education has been working on the problem for well over 40 years and hasn't solved it yet. So tells you it's kind of a bigger issue than anybody has been able to discern at this point. So that's, again, why I really rely much more on the fit of the school for your student than even the price, because, again, it's all about where they're going to fit in and finish. So, but anyway, so there's that scenario. But then as you mentioned, the transfer route, so this is much more traditional thing to think about because, again, you can get a semester in or even a full year and say, you know what, something's just not quite right here, or I thought it was going to be like this. Now I'm a year in, I realize I really need a different setting. And that could go both ways.
Distance plays into that as well a lot, right? The distance plays in a lot often in that. People think they can go that far, but then realize they can't.
Right. So you have the dream school. I want to be at, this Ivy League place. And you go there and then you realize you're further from home. It's a totally different environment as far as the seasons, just whatever. There's lots of different things that play into that. Then you realize, hey, I really do need to be either closer to home or I went to a small school thinking I was going to get this real personalized attention. And you know what? I just don't fit. There is personalized attention, but this isn't me. I need a different environment. It can work both ways, small to large, large to small. But at that point, the path is still going to be the same. It's finding out what's transferable. And so as you alluded to, having a plan to figure that out. And so as you walk through that and you're trying to figure out what is the next best school for me, it's the idea of finding out what will transfer. And so most schools you're going to be considering hold what's called regional accreditation. So it's going to be accredited by an accrediting body within the region geographically where your school is located. In the case of my school, it's SACS, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. But different regions of the country will have different ones. But most of those that are regionally accredited, most coursework will transfer. Now, whether it comes in as a course in the major you're trying to finish or not is a different story. Sometimes it will come in as elective credit, things like that. So you do want to be watchful how far into the process you are when you try and transfer. If you've gone 2 years somewhere, and especially if the degree, if you're changing majors or you're moving, something else, sometimes your credits won't quite line up real well. And so then you really do have to think through, is it best for me to just to finish out where I am because you're already 2 years in versus transferring and maybe having to add another semester or something like that to be able to complete. You have to factor those costs in. But again, that's why I think it's super imperative in the front end to really find the best fit, because that'll save you a lot of that headache. But again, if you find yourself in that situation, it's not the end of the world. You can still accomplish it. I would still always advise try and find someplace that fits so that they can complete, because it's a lot better to have perhaps some debt at the end of all this, but still have a way to pay it back versus the idea of, I've only got halfway through, now I have lots of student loans and I can't complete the degree, and I now have to find a way to earn money to pay off this loan debt. So always a good idea to complete it. But again, back to the transferability piece, that's something you have to actually figure out on a school-by-school basis, unfortunately. There isn't some mass repository where you can plug in a class and it'll tell you where it transfers to across the country. But again, so it's, again, back to the homework and due diligence, looking at what will transfer in and then how to make that work in your students' new school setting.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I know that you have to get off to your conference, and I think we've addressed things pretty well here. What I am going to ask is, because we've recorded this ahead of time at the different chapters that are hosting the events, there are going to be questions. Would that be okay if I summarize those and get some of those questions off to you if people have specific questions about what you said here today?
Yep.
Excellent, sir. Excellent. Well, I will do that. And thanks again for your time. Good luck at the conference, and good luck with all your traveling, and hope your May 1st is a good one.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it very much.
How are things looking for you so far?
Very well. Very
Excellent.
well. We're doing really well. We have a specific plan we're trying to work out, and it's coming about very nicely. So.
Excellent, excellent. Well, congratulations, sir, and we'll look forward to. Thank you so much for being on, and hopefully in the future, when this network has grown even dramatically larger, we can have you back in a year or two.
Oh, that'd be great. I would love that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here in the beginning. It means a lot to us.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Enjoy.
All right.